History remembers Alexander the Great as the undefeated conqueror who carved out one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. But behind the shining image of the young Macedonian king who dreamed of uniting East and West, there are truths that few people know, stories of obsession, betrayal, strange rituals, and mysteries that linger long after his death. Tonight, we will journey through 10 little-known facts about Alexander the Great, each one revealing a darker or more unusual side of the man who sought to be both mortal and divine. The first secret is that Alexander never lost a battle, but his victories came at a personal cost that was almost hidden from the world. Ancient chroniclers liked to portray him as invincible, striding across battlefields untouched by mortal wounds. The truth is that Alexander was gravely injured many times. At the Battle of Granicus, he nearly died when a Persian nobleman cleaved his helmet in two, only to be saved at the last moment by a companion. In Gaza, an arrow pierced through his shoulder and left him unable to lift his arm for weeks. And most famously, in India, at the siege of Multan, an arrow tore into his chest and lodged deep in his lung. His men thought he was finished, that their king would bleed to death on the dusty walls of a foreign city. But Alexander staggered back to his feet, coughing blood, and rallied his army until the city fell. These stories remind us that even the greatest conqueror was made of fragile flesh, and that his legend was built not on being untouchable, but on enduring wounds that would have killed lesser men. The second secret lies in the object he kept closest to him. Alexander slept with two things under his pillow: his sword and a copy of Homer's Iliad, placed inside a precious casket taken from the treasures of Darius III. For him, the Iliad was not just poetry. It was a manual for life and war, a map of how a mortal might rise to immortality. He read it constantly, quoted it to his friends, and treated it like scripture. In his eyes, the great hero Achilles was not just a figure of the past, he was a model for his own destiny. Alexander believed that by following Achilles, he too could achieve eternal glory. This obsession shaped the way he fought, the way he led, and even the way he wanted to die. Young, at the peak of his power, remembered forever. This leads to the third secret, his almost religious devotion to Achilles. When Alexander marched into Troy, he ignored the glittering city and went straight to the burial mound said to be the tomb of Achilles. There, he performed sacrifices, cut his hair, and ran naked in ritual around the hero's grave. He staged races and ceremonies, as though to bind himself to the warrior who had lived and died centuries before. To Alexander, Troy was not just a place on the map. It was the beginning of his own story, the stage where he cast himself as the new Achilles. And yet, there was something tragic in this devotion. Achilles died young, consumed by rage and loss, and Alexander seemed to embrace the same fate, as though he welcomed the shadow of death, if it meant his name would never fade. The fourth secret reveals a darker side of Alexander's character, the night he killed his closest friend in a drunken rage. Clitus the Black was no ordinary companion. He was the man who had once saved Alexander's life, cutting down an enemy who had raised a blade over the young king's head. But years later, at a banquet overflowing with wine, Clitus mocked Alexander, accusing him of forgetting his Macedonian roots and adopting the arrogance of Persian kings. The insult pierced deeper than any spear. Alexander, inflamed by drink and wounded pride, seized a spear and drove it through Clitus's body. The hall fell silent. The king who dreamed of uniting cultures had murdered the friend who had once kept him alive. When the haze of alcohol faded, Alexander collapsed into grief, locking himself away, refusing food and crying for days. This moment shows us the fracture inside his soul. A man who longed to be noble, yet could not master his own fury. The fifth secret is one of the strangest experiments in mass social engineering the ancient world ever witnessed. In 324 BCE, in the Persian city of Susa, Alexander organized a collective wedding, unlike anything before or since. He himself married Statera, the daughter of the defeated King Darius, while at the same time over 10,000 of his Macedonian soldiers were married to Persian women in a single vast ceremony. The idea was bold, to fuse two worlds, to create a generation that would be neither fully Greek nor fully Persian, but something new, a true empire without borders. For one night, the air was filled with music, gold, and vows. But when Alexander died the following year, the dream dissolved. Most of the soldiers abandoned their foreign wives and returned home. The marriages became a symbol of how fragile his grand vision truly was, and how quickly it crumbled without him. The sixth secret reveals Alexander's hunger, not just for territory, but for divinity. After conquering Egypt, he traveled deep into the desert to the oracle of Siwa, where priests hailed him as the son of Zeus Ammon. From that moment onward, Alexander began to see himself as more than mortal. He encouraged the ritual of proskynesis, bowing to the ground before him, a gesture Greeks had always reserved for gods. Many of his Macedonian officers resisted, scandalized by this shift. But Alexander pushed forward, demanding recognition not just as king, but as a living god. This was not mere vanity. To Alexander, being divine was a political weapon, a way to unite Greeks, Persians, and Egyptians under one figure who transcended them all. Yet it also sowed resentment, for even his closest companions began to whisper that their young general was becoming intoxicated with his own myth. The seventh secret is perhaps the most unsettling. When Alexander died in Babylon, at just 32 years old, his body was prepared for burial. Yet days passed, and unlike ordinary men, his corpse did not show signs of decay. Ancient writers recorded this as proof of his divine nature. Crowds flocked to see the uncorrupted body, and the legend spread that Alexander had not truly died. Modern theories suggest something far stranger. Some believe he may have suffered from a rare neurological disorder, Guillain-Barré syndrome, which can cause paralysis so complete that the body appears lifeless while the mind remains aware. If true, it would mean that Alexander, hailed as a god for his unrotting body, might have been trapped inside a living tomb, embalmed while still conscious. A chilling possibility that casts a new shadow over his final days. The eighth secret is the great mystery of his death itself. The official story is that after a night of drinking, Alexander was struck with fever, unable to speak or move, and slowly wasted away over nearly 2 weeks. But the cause has been debated for more than 2,000 years. Some say he was poisoned, though the length of his illness makes that unlikely. Others argue it was malaria or typhoid fever, diseases common in Mesopotamia. Still others point to his heavy drinking and speculate he suffered acute pancreatitis, his body destroyed by years of excess. Whatever the truth, his soldiers watched helplessly as their godlike commander dwindled before their eyes, unable to lift his head, unable even to give a final command about his succession. In the silence of his deathbed lay the seed of the chaos that would tear his empire apart. The ninth secret lies not in his life, but in what became of his remains. After his death, Alexander's body was placed in a golden sarcophagus and transported first toward Macedonia, then seized and diverted to Egypt. In the city of Alexandria, a magnificent tomb was built, and for centuries it became a shrine. Great rulers like Julius Caesar and Augustus visited, paying homage to the man who had once ruled the world. But then, sometime around the 4th century CE, the tomb disappeared. Was it destroyed in riots, looted by emperors desperate for wealth, or hidden away to protect it from desecration? No one knows. The body of Alexander the Great, the most famous conqueror of antiquity, has never been found. To this day, archaeologists search for it, and every rumor of a hidden chamber in Egypt or Greece revives the hope that one of history's greatest mysteries might one day be solved. The 10th and final secret is the scale of his legacy, something both immense and haunting. Alexander died young, yet his name spread across continents. He founded more than 70 cities, most famously Alexandria in Egypt, which became a center of learning for centuries. In the centuries after his death, stories about him grew into legend. In Persia, he became Iskander, a hero woven into epic poetry. In medieval Europe, he was turned into a figure of romance, his campaigns embellished with fantastical tales of monsters and miracles. Even today, over 2,000 years later, his image continues to haunt the modern imagination. But this legacy is double-edged. His empire collapsed almost immediately after his death, torn apart by the ambitions of his generals. The world he dreamed of uniting dissolved into blood and civil war. What remained was not the eternal kingdom he had envisioned, but the shadow of one man's ambition stretching across history. And so, when we peel back the layers of legend, the Alexander who emerges is more complex, more human, and perhaps more terrifying than the figure we learned about in school. A man who endured terrible wounds, yet seemed invincible, who modeled himself after mythical heroes, who sought to be worshipped as a god, who killed his own friend in a fit of rage, whose body defied decay, and whose tomb is still lost. His life is a reminder that greatness and darkness often walk hand in hand. We are left not just with admiration, but with questions. Was Alexander truly a genius who dreamed beyond his age, or a man consumed by hubris who could never escape his own shadow? Perhaps that is why, even now, his story continues to fascinate us. Because the greatest conqueror in history was also one of its greatest mysteries.